Well, Bill Blair is Canada's Minister for National Defence. Happy to have him on the program this evening. Minister, thank you for making the time.
Thank you, Michael, for having me.
So, here we have Donald Trump pressuring Ukraine to end the fight with Russia. In so doing, he cuts off aid to Ukraine, cuts off intelligence sharing to Ukraine, criticizes President Zelenskyy, praises Vladimir Putin. Are you worried that the last 3 years are going to be for nothing?
I can't tell you. First of all, I think it's important to clarify Putin is the aggressor here. He's the one that illegally invaded Ukraine. And I believe President Zelenskyy has been heroic in standing up for his country and his people. And the work that he's done around the world and with all of us has been really quite extraordinary. Now, I understand the importance of working towards a peaceful settlement of that conflict. But we also believe very strongly it should be a just peace, a sustainable peace for the people of Ukraine, who have already suffered so much in the defense of their country. I believe that there is still lots of work that we can all do together to support Ukraine, including moving towards a peaceful resolution. And security guarantees from the United States are critically important to that effort. And so there's a lot of rhetoric right now and a lot of noise around this discussion, but I think there's some really important work that needs to be done for the people of Ukraine to secure their future, their safety, and I think to send a clear message to Putin that might does not make right, and you don't get to invade another country just because you want it and take what they've got because you covet it.
Are you worried, though? Because here you had President Zelenskyy just last Friday being berated in the Oval Office, and Donald Trump saying to him, you have no cards, you have no cards, you have to come to the table. Are you worried for Zelenskyy and what this negotiation might lead for Ukraine?
I have a lot of confidence in Zelenskyy. I worry for the Ukrainian people. And I worry for all of our European allies as well, who are also on the edge today. I'm worried about their security and their safety as well, because I believe that if this is not done right, it emboldens a person like Putin. It can embolden other autocrats and tyrants around the world. And so it's very important that this be a respectful conversation. I also think it's really important Ukraine should be at the table, not on the table. And I think it's equally important that other European allies, including Canada, should be also part of those discussions. We are already working, our Prime Minister was in London on the weekend, working with a coalition of nations, the coalition of the willing, in trying to find new ways. If the United States wishes to withdraw some of their support, then I think that requires the rest of us look at how is it possible that we might be able to step up and provide that necessary support. There's still a really important role for the United States, and I hope that these discussions will lead to them coming back to the table as we require them to.
Well, in the meantime, we have the UK, we have France talking about having boots on the ground. Is Canada willing to put boots on the ground to be a security backstop for Ukraine?
Canada has communicated to the United Kingdom and to France and all of our allies who are part of that coalition that we're prepared to do our part, and that could include the deployment of our resources in Ukraine in the appropriate and right circumstances. We also believe that certain conditions need to exist, including those security guarantees for the safety of our people and for the safety of Europe. That's the work that's ongoing. But Canada has made it very clear we are among the willing, and we will come to the table and we will deliver capabilities. We're already deeply engaged in European security. We're leading the brigade in Latvia. We don't want to diminish those other commitments. It is challenging to respond to what is required, but we're going to do what is necessary.
Mm-hmm. Well, it makes me wonder about the United States, because you talk about an authoritarian regime under Vladimir Putin. We have now the U.S. president embracing Putin. He also talks about annexing Canada. How concerned should Canadians be that the United States is no longer a reliable partner?
Frankly, I'm concerned by the rhetoric that we have seen and the intention and the imposition of these tariffs. I think it's become clear that the original justification for the tariffs, with concerns about the border, immigration, and fentanyl, although those are legitimate concerns, that was not the real motive behind the threat of tariff. And I think that it is threatening the prosperity, well-being, and security of our country in many respects. But at the same time, I've worked with the United States for most of my adult life, Michael, and I've worked with the FBI and the CIA. I've worked with the Homeland Security and their national security intelligence agencies. In our experience, there is great resilience, dependability, and reliability among those institutions. Different administrations come and go. They have to operate under the direction that they receive from their executive. I think there is enough about that relationship that is worth fighting for, and I'm committed. I met earlier today with the commander of NORAD. NORAD has been keeping Canada and North America safe for over 70 years. We're still committed to that relationship. I have confidence and trust in that relationship, but that trust and confidence is being significantly challenged by the actions of the president.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned NORAD, and immediately I go to Arctic security because, of course, you just released. I guess approaching a year now, the revised our defense policy with a focus on the Arctic. And I was speaking to Lloyd Axworthy, former Foreign Affairs Minister, and a couple of weeks ago, and he suggested that if we're going to really be serious about Arctic defense, perhaps our partners in the Arctic should no longer be the Americans. What do you say to that?
Not exclusively Americans. I think our first partnership is with Canadians. And I'm heading up to Iqaluit later on today to meet with the Premier of Nunavut. I've been on the phone today with the premiers of the Northwest Territories and of the Yukon. We're also meeting with the Inuit and Indigenous organizations up there because those are our real partners. And frankly, they've got so much to contribute to our sovereignty, our security, and the defense of this country. And we're going to be making some announcements about some of the investments we have to make. I think the Americans remain an important partner to the defense of North America and in the Arctic. But I also want to be really clear. We work already very closely with the Americans. I have hundreds of Canadian Armed Forces members who are working on an American basis. The Americans also want to work in Canada. That will not be done on an American base. It'll be done on a Canadian base, and which we will host our allies. But it's not just the Americans as well. We've reached out to other Nordic countries. NATO has recently seen the entrance of Finland and Sweden into NATO, along with Norway, Denmark, ourselves, and the Americans. We now have the entire Northern Arctic, beyond what Russia possesses, is now a NATO frontier. We have an opportunity to work with our closest partners, not just the Americans, but with all those NATO countries, and in particular with the Nordic countries that I've referenced. That we have much to learn from each other. We have much to contribute to each other, and I think united we can do a better job. But Canada has to do its part. First and foremost, Canada has to step up, make significant investments in our own nation. Some of this can be not just investments in defense, but investments in nation building, because that infrastructure that we need to build there is going to support northern communities. It's going to create prosperity and opportunity in the north. I really believe that infrastructure is the key to our sovereignty and our national defense. And so those are investments that we're going to be making. And that's what I'll be speaking to about when we get up there. But it's also really important, Michael, that we do that, we have that conversation and we make that plans and we execute on our plans in consultation, cooperation, and partnership with the people of the North. I've heard and watched others who frankly, sitting down here south, and they come up with ideas in some political war room about what they think will be a good announcement. That's not the way to do this right. The way you do this right is you go and engage with the people of the North. I'm quickly running out of time. I only have about 30 seconds, but I have to ask you, though, because you talk about having to make the investment. And I think there was a time when the logic was, well, if we make the investment and procure American arms, that will satisfy the demands for more investment in NATO. Are we now shifting that to look at European procurement instead of looking at the United States? I'm going to go and get the very best for the armed forces that they require. But Michael, we have a remarkable industry here in Canada. Our military industries, our aeronautic industries are second to none. I have been meeting with the CEOs of those companies in a series of roundtables to develop for Canada a defense industrial policy. I think there's huge opportunity for us to make those investments that need to be made, but to bring along Canadian industry, Canadian workers, to actually spend Canadian dollars in a way that helps the Canadian economy and employs our citizens. We're also going to be doing business with our allies, and there is some business that we, by necessity, will do with the United States, but our focus is on getting the best value for Canadians' hard-earned tax dollars. And I think one of the ways to invest those tax dollars appropriately is to make sure that we invest those dollars to support Canadian communities, support Canadian workers, Canadian companies, and the Canadian economy. Minister Bill Blair, always appreciate the talk. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael.